Welcome to a new episode of Today and Tomorrow, the podcast where we explore how power, technology, and narratives are being reshaped in real time. We don't just focus on what is visible today, but on the forces that will define how the world of tomorrow is built. In this episode, we dive into a question that is more importantly than ever: who gets to tell a country's story, and what happens when narrative and reality fall out of alignment. We'll be talking about credibility, influence, and why image without substance has no future. And we also look at the role of technology, strategic sovereignty, and long term transformation in a multipolar world. To explore this, we're joined again by a wonderful guest who operates precisely at this intersection of diplomacy, strategy, storytelling, and deep tech. But more in just a second. First of all, again, as always, Dieter, it's great to have you here. How are you today?
Oh, fine. And it's really an amazing time. A lot of things have happened. My new book is coming out. You see the German book in the background. And the English one will just follow in a month. And of course, the Diplomatic World magazine had its 25th anniversary, where I was lucky for the first time in person to meet our guest of today, Haya. And she really is an amazing woman, and she is bringing lots of input um, into the organization and opening a new field to us. And we combined this aspect of nation branding with the technology. And thanks to Ingrid Vasiliou-Feltes, who already was a guest in this podcast before, who's also involved in this. But it's a great pleasure to have you here now, and yeah, to have a deep dive into the world of nation branding.
Hi, it's so nice to have you here. First of all, would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers? Who are you?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dita and Alex, for having me. I'm very happy to be here, and this is a conversation that I deeply care about. So thank you very much. So my name is Haya Mvita. I'm Director Nation Branding at Diplomatic World Institute here in Brussels, where I live. And I work at the intersection of diplomacy, narrative, and long term credibility. So my work focuses on how countries build trust and influence over time, not through slogans, but through alignment between identity, institutions, and action. So basically, that's what I do.
You talked a little bit about how you combine branding, nations, and actions, and there's this wonderful word of nation branding. But if you had to explain it, what it really means in one sentence, what would you say? How can a nation be a brand?
I think it's a very important question because this is, yes, a new discipline. I would say very recent, but it's most of the time it's misunderstood. In very simple terms, nation branding is often understood as a long-term management of a country's reputations. So how it is perceived internationally, based on what it does, not just what it says. So that definition makes sense. But for me, that's only a starting point because if I have to explain nation branding, I would say that nation branding is about revealing a country's real identity and aligning it over time with its policies, institutions, and behavior. So it's not promotions, it's not fabrication, and I always say it's revelation. So my perspective, I know it comes from an unusual background. A little bit about my background. I worked for years in with public figures and internationally recognized artists. And of course, managing artists' image and personal brand is not the same as shaping a country's image. The scale is completely different. A nation involves institution, history, politics, people, geopolitics. But there is one principle that applies everywhere: authenticity. It cannot be manufactured. It has to be revealed. It has to be shaped. And with artists, the moment the story doesn't match who they really are, people feel it immediately. So I like to give that example because most people can relate to that, and they understand then the principle of yes, working on a nation brand. So credibility is very important. You don't invent identity, and identity is also a key word. You let it emerge. So for countries, the logic is similar, but much more complex. Every country has already its cultural DNA, its history, its strengths, contradictions sometimes, its talents, its people. And nation branding is about identifying those elements, aligning institution and policy around them, and making that identity legible to the world. So that's why something like Made in Germany works powerfully. Nobody needs to explain it. It's because everybody understands it. It's not a slogan. It stands for something almost everybody agreed. The quality, the German quality. So it's the result of decades of consistency. So for me, to conclude, nation branding today is not about what you say, but it's about what it's not about what you say you are, but it's about who you are and whether your actions confirms it over time.
Um, do you have more examples? You just mentioned Made in Germany, but as you said, people often confuse it with personal branding, with marketing, with all the other things. They have a lot in common, and I understand the example of Made in Germany, but what is a true nation brand? Except from Made in Germany, do you have other examples for our listeners and viewers?
Yes, we have a lot of countries. Switzerland. We have also Japan, who have really strong brands. They are not loud. It's you could also compare a real good brand with an established luxury brand like Hermes. These are really quite luxury brands, and an established brand. It's not really loud. It doesn't go to marketing because because a lot of people confuse marketing with nation branding, and this is maybe something that I understand. It's common, and you encounter it very oftenly, but a lot of people confuse it because marketing and nation branding both deal with image, but they are fundamentally different. Marketing is about visibility, and visibility attracts attention. Nation branding is about credibility, and credibility is that what lasts, and that what also differentiates one brand to another or one country to another. So marketing asks different question than nation branding. Marketing will ask, how do we attract attention? But nation branding will ask, do people trust us once they pay attention? So a marketing campaign can create interest very quickly, but it cannot create trust. Institution don't deliver if there is no institution behind, because with nation branding you work with institution, with policies maker, and that's the really it's what creates trust at the end of the day. So you can manage sometimes the perception, through marketing, but you cannot manage a nation brand, because this is tied to reality, to how people live. And so that's why I would say nation branding is not the same as marketing, which is more communication, but nation brand is not just.
I mildly contradict you, dear Haya, because also in marketing, visibility is supposed to build trust and credibility for the brand, for the product. So ideally, it has a lot of similarities, but of course, in reality, it looks a lot different. I fully agree on that.
I would in this as well, to follow up on Dieter's remark. Also, while you were talking, I was thinking about, yeah, credibility is one thing, but a lot of nations also need the image because of tourism, for example, where you don't need a credible country, but a attractive country. So how do those fuse together?
Yes, but credibility, when we talk about credibility in terms of nation branding, it is built much deeper. You can, of course, you have, as I mentioned, you can have luxury brands who are really credible. They are very credible because they have built their brand, their image over time. But still, the nation brand, or when you're working with nation branding, because some experts also disagree, they don't agree with the terms of nation branding, they prefer nation brand. So when we're talking about credibility with nation brand, because of all the institution, all the policy that are around it, that surrounds that, and that creates that solid image. Of course, you could say like a luxury brand is also an institution, but you understand we are talking on another, a very higher level here when we talk about a nation, because there is history, there are people, there are also, different communities. So you have to bring all this together to create something that's unified, a nation or a region sometimes when we talk about nation branding. So I don't know if, yeah, I understand, Dita, when you say that you might contradict it, but there is a difference, which is really, it's in yeah, in nation branding, it's much deeper when we talk about credibility.
I agree, definitely. But also, I only wanted to stress the similarities because I think we also can learn a lot from marketing in this respect without doing the mistakes that are done in marketing.
Yes, that's why I express also my background as a music manager. We work, with artists in marketing. It's very important. It's a good, I think, basis. But I don't think we should work with a nation brand the same as with a simple brand. So that's really important to have still this separated. You can understand how marketing works, but you should not apply it as it is to nation branding. That's important.
Let's dig a little bit deeper into nation branding. You developed the Seed Power Framework. What exactly stands Seed for, and what problems were you trying to solve with it?
Wow, yes, that's an interesting question. I created the seed power as a strategic framework out of necessity because the existing model of soft power didn't always fit what I was observing in practice. Soft power is a very important concept when we talk about nation branding. The idea is that influence comes from attraction, from cultures, from values, and it makes a lot of sense. And the issue was never soft power itself for me. The issue was that soft power was often applied as a universal model without adapting it to different historical, political, and social realities. So seed power is not a rejection of soft power. That's very important for me. It is a contextual version of it, just like in South Korea. I don't know if you know that they have developed their own model of influence, which they call sweet power, because it really reflects their culture, their history, and their development path. So they didn't copy soft power as it is, but they adapted it for in their realities. So the terminology here matters for seed power. I will explain to you because, as you can already imagine, seed power is a biological terms. It's something that grows. It's a seed that when you put it on earth, it grows. It creates roots, and then it grows eventually to a tree. So what appears above the surface works only if what's underneath is strong. So at the same with the same idea, and I use this word seed power, but at the same time, it's also an acronym for sovereignty, empowerment, endurance, and development. So the idea is simple, is that influence has to be rooted deeply before it can be projected. So this came, of course, of from my observing, from for me observing many African countries and emerging countries. Yeah, it's not that they failed with their nation brand activity or actions, but it was often a gap between what really are, and what they try to how they try to present themselves internationally. And I saw a lot of effort put into visibility, into attraction, into looking modern, to attract tourists. And but sometimes it's really, like I sometimes say, it's like putting makeup on something that wasn't really fully ready underneath. And when pressure or crisis came, then the image didn't hold. So for me, seed power was about preserving authenticity. Yes. So maybe I can also say that it's yes. To summarize, I would say seed power. It says before projecting influence, make sure the roots are there. Can your country choose? Is your country sovereign? Do your people benefit from it? Empowerment. Can it last? Endurance. And does it improve real life development? These are the fundamental questions and for this framework.
You said authenticity is the most important thing. I really love the picture of the makeup putting on something that's not ready. But how can we tell as a country if we are really authentic as a nation in our narrative?
How we know this because it reflects the reality of the people. You don't have to put many words, and sometimes if the reality is what you're saying, words doesn't you don't need so much campaign, because at a certain point it is as it is, and people trust who you are, not because you say it, but because they experience it. So I think the reality is here, the element that will that will tell if what you're saying is really true.
Yeah, and I think this issue of nation branding and also the Z aspect you just described, especially the developing part, is today coming into a much more complex environment because the situation also for countries is everything is changing in a very high degree with very high speed. International relations are changing, and everything is driven. Technologies are increasingly influence also core elements of a nation. And I think that's why it was important for us also to include the deep tech aspect into it, because uh, you need to be prepared and you need to find an authentic way to deal with these issues and incorporate into your self understanding. Um, so, and I think that this is going to be very important for nations to make their branding and their authentic fit for the future. I hope you can agree to that, Haya.
Yes, I think that it's part of a nation branding. So, as there are several sectors that you can promote a nation. So, technology is definitely part of it. So, you have tourism, you have also investment, you have technology definitely as part of nation branding. Of course, also culture, but technology is part of it.
As technology is part of it, and as you said, reality tells what is really true. Um, it sounds a little bit nearly too perfect. So, a follow-up question is: can nation branding fail? And if so, what typically causes the failure, the disruption between reality and the truth?
Nation branding can absolutely fail. And when it fails, it often fails very fast. And the main reason is the misalignment. So when a country says when what a country says is no longer what people experience and what it does, then trust breaks, and trust can break very fast. And you can manage perception for a while, but you cannot manage reality. That's what I was also saying, that reality, people experience it, and you cannot manage that. You have no control of how people feel, especially in the world where we are connected and everybody comes with his phone and can record it. You have no control over the reality that people experience. So we see this also very clearly in the recent international reputation rankings, the Global Soft Power Index, which was recently published during Davos week here, and they are just they showed us clearly how some countries have lost because yes, just a little bit for context. When every year the global soft power global index is published, you don't see that country lose 1 point more than 1 point or 2 points. Often it's around that. But there are some times, like this year, that some countries have lost significantly, like 8 to 11 points in a single year. That's brutal. That's really brutal, not because it was a bad communication, but it was because the behavior caught up with the narrative. Things like aggression, hidden practice, ethical scandals, instability. When those things comes to light, reputation doesn't decline gently, it collapses. So nation branding doesn't fail because a country is quiet. It really fails because the story and the behavior stop matching. So once trust is broken, no campaign can repair that quickly.
Well, yeah. As a matter of fact, Haya, you just highlighted also the importance of technology because you mentioned the smartphones and how difficult it is to control information, and it's much more than that. When you look in the field of deep fake and what AI, artificial intelligence, can do by now, so you can fake reality. Of course, it's still not reality, but a lot of people will believe it. So it's a problem you have internally because opposition groups and terrorists can use that internally in a country, but you also have it on the outside because it can disturb massively your narrative. And that's something to be prepared for. And that's only one of the possible impacts that the technology advancement has, because it's going so rapidly, and it makes it very hard to adapt and to get resilient in this respect. I think becomes more and more important, and therefore this needs to be part of also of a nation branding approach.
Yes, we are living in a multipolar system, and also there is a lot of transition happening. And of course, some nation might not be really prepared for the digital, shift that is happening. So there is something when we talk about technology, it's no longer about it's a technical aspect. It's really more and more becoming about sovereignty. It's important to know where is your data, who control the infrastructure, and if and how dependent are you on system you don't govern. A country can be like a European country can be modern and open, but still has strong dependencies and don't really manages their own platforms that their citizens use, and that's a huge topic. In I think in the next we are already seeing it now. I heard recently a discussion about the EU and X, and there are a lot of discussion in this context, but. I would say that cybersecurity and digital infrastructure play a really important role in shaping national power and reputation, because they have also become, as I said, elements of sovereignty, but also of national power. and national reputation. Today, a country is judged not only by its diplomacy or its economy, but whether its system works, whether they are secure and whether they are trusted. So digital infrastructure in the model form is a form of state capacity, and it shows if a country can deliver services, and it also attract investments, support businesses, and it's also, yeah, if it's function and it's reliable, then people trust that, and it's good for the reputation of a country. So a digital strong backbone, it signals competence and readiness. And if it's fragile, it really can affect the reputation and the perceived value of a nation.
But as you already mentioned, the talks between X and the EU, AI is a very powerful trend, but it's also a very big hype. And a lot of times we have nations who follow hypes, who follow tech driven hypes, and say, we are now modern. They don't usually have the backbone, sometimes they have. But the problem with hypes is they're hypes. They can disappear, they can get a little bit softer. Where is the exact line which you viewed in all the nations you had a watch at between credibility and tech-driven hype? Not tech, but the hype. How can we stop from following everything?
Yes, I mean, AI adds another layer here. It's not just a buzzword, but is really a test of governance and how a country manages AI, data, ethics, and institution tells really if a nation is prepared for the future or not. I think a good example for your question is Lithuania, who has it's a country who didn't make a lot of noise. It was not about the hype, but it has created a real ecosystem around the digitalization, or also giving opportunity to startups to just start their business over there. So that experience is real. It's not hype. And then that's why also the story spreads naturally. So yes, the problem with innovation, it's easy to claim and very hard to sustain. That's why the hype begins. So the line is crossed when a country talk about technology without adoption. So when platforms exist but they aren't used, or big strategies are announced but institution can't deliver, that's credibility. Yeah, it's not really credible for a country to do that. But as I said, Lithuania is a very good example. It didn't show bills like big slogan by talking, but it created real digital and fintech ecosystem with clear rules, trust, and uptake, and the narrative followed the results. That's the difference. And I think a credible tech narrative doesn't say, look how advanced we are. It says, look how reliable this works. They can prove it. That's the difference.
We talked a lot about technology. We talked about how nations integrate technology into their own existence. But is technological excellence becoming a new form of soft power, or is it evolving into something closer to hard power?
Oh, this is a really good question. And honestly, I don't think it fits neatly into any of our existing categories. Traditionally, soft power is about attraction. Hard power is about force, and smart power is the combination of both. And we often use Europe and the European Union, for example, of smart power, because Europe doesn't usually force, but it regulates, it sets standards, it controls market access. So if you want to participate to the European ecosystem, you have to adapt. That's smart power. It's about an instrument, so you can see it. They use those instruments. You can negotiate that. You can contest that. So at first glance, technology, yes, technology might also look like a smart power. But I think it goes much deeper than that, because Smart power, as I said, it works through decision, policies, sometimes also sanctions, but technology works through structures. It shapes the environment before decisions are even made. And it doesn't really, so as a citizen, you won't even experience it as a pressure. You experience it as yes, it is how the system works. So that's why hesitate to call it smart power. Some people might also think about sharp power. I don't know if you heard already the term sharp power. It's influence through manipulation and pressure inside a system. But that doesn't fit either because technological excellence is not necessarily deceptive or aggressive. So that's really a good question because I was thinking about what would we say is technological excellence or power? I would say it's a hybrid form of power. So not exercised through command or persuasion, but through architecture, standards, and system. So it attracts like soft power, it constrains like hard power, but it does it quietly, structurally, and often invisibly. And that's why it comes with a lot of responsibility, I believe, because when you shape system, you don't just influence behavior, you shape reality and lives. So maybe we could call it, I don't know, structural power? I leave it open to discussion. It could be structural power, a new terms, a new declination of soft power. You know, we have seed power, sweet power, sharp power, smart power, could be structural power. Who knows? But that I found this question very interesting.
Thank you. We talked a lot about the current state, but if you look some years ahead, for example, 10 or 20 years, what would you say? How did the world change? What would you say? How is seed applied in a nation brand?
So for me, in 20 years, success won't be measured by how well a country explains itself, but it will be measured by how naturally it is recognized. You know, when seed power is done properly, you don't need to explain, as I already mentioned. You have a good example like Dubai. It started, you know, on the social media that people were starting saying, Habibi, come to Dubai. And eventually, without even the government, you know, getting involved, people would just post video and it went viral. So when seed power is truly there, you don't need to talk a lot, or you don't need extensive campaign. You don't need to speak much because you recognize it through people, through posture, through presence, and through social media in our days. And I think also one image I really like, it was during the AFCON in Morocco, the football, you know, for African continent. It just happened recently in Morocco. And one Congolese supporter, he was standing still in the middle of a moving crowd. It had no logo, no message, no budget, and yet the image traveled globally. And that moment, it didn't come from nowhere, you know, because I said also you have, for branding, nation branding, you need institution behind. So seed power is like standing there, having a global exposure, but it's authentic, it's organic. So, but there are, of course, you have your nation behind it because it couldn't travel without, because it traveled with the Congolese delegation. There was at least of an organization behind him, a minimum of a state capacity behind that presence. That's important because it's not just symbolic that you're standing there, but it is rooted in a development and in a nation building. And I really emphasize on nation branding is directly linked to nation building, because if there is you build something for the citizens, there is confidence, and when and the citizens know that they have something behind them, the institution, you know, the opportunity, sense of belonging, even dignity and pride. That's very important. So for me, the link between nation branding and nation building is very important. Otherwise, it's really fragile. And yes, a seed, for me, the seed power works in the same way. What you see above the ground only exists because something solid grew underneath. And in 20 years, countries that have truly applied seed power will look like that. And they will stand firmly, they will be recognizable without explanation, and their citizen at home and the diaspora will carry the narrative naturally. At that point, nation branding is no longer about what you show or what you say, it's about who you are and how the world feels it and can relate to it. Thank you so much. Yes, for the question.
Those were wonderful words. I have one more question, if you allow me. The last question is, after all you told, after all you had a view into the future, from your opinion and from your experience, what skills will the next generation of diplomats and political leaders need to develop to really implement seed power?
They need to listen, being able to listen and to understand. It's really a skill that I really put very high, because you cannot create as a diplomat, when you are working in diplomacy, you have to be someone who listens and observes a lot. And in my country, where I'm coming from originally, they say that we have two ears and one mouth. It means that we should listen more and talk less. And if we do that, I think there is a wisdom behind that. And in diplomacy, I think it's also very important to listen more and talk less.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I thank you, Haya. It's not brand new for me, because we are discussing this topic for quite a while now together with Ingrid, and so but still it was very refreshing to have you here in the podcast. And there's something I learned, and that's we also have to watch much closer the role of tech companies, because they develop because of their strengths and their influence they create via their technologies. They increasingly are developing their own sovereignty and start competing with nations. And this will be, well, one thing, interesting, dangerous, or transformative. I don't know what in the end it will be. But it is something we closely need to watch, and we need to include in our discussions about nation branding and the future of diplomacy.
Absolutely. I agree.
And with this, again, from my side, thank you for your insights. Thank you for all those wonderful ideas. I think our viewers and listeners can take a lot home. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Today and Tomorrow. We've talked about narratives and power, about credibility in the multipolar world, and about why the stories nations tell only matter when they're matched by real capacity, responsibility, and long-term vision. If there's one takeaway, it's the future won't belong to those who speak the loudest, and your final words were so wonderful, but to those who make actions, who listen, who make their narratives believable and real. So thank you again for your time. Thank you, Dieter, for your wonderful insights. I really enjoyed the conversation. If you, dear viewers and listeners, enjoyed this podcast, feel free to subscribe, to share the episode. And from my side, I say, until next time, stay curious, keep thinking about today and tomorrow. And the last words go to Haya and Dieter.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my first podcast, and you managed to get me here. I hope it was at least okay.
It was wonderful.
It was absolutely wonderful. And
it was really wonderful.
Thank you so much for your trust and for having me here. So I really appreciate also the conversation. And, sometimes you work on topics, and being able also to share that It's different, but I will have to
Of
go
course.
through that. Yeah. Manchmal
And
muss
you
man ins kaltes Wasser springen, as I say.
now everyone who doesn't speak German is totally confused, but this is fine.
Well, you
Sometimes,
sometimes have to jump into the cold water, and thank you, Haya. I know you had your fears, and but you did great. And
yes.
thank you. And I'm looking forward for our next steps together.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Dieter.
And from this, the last words. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and goodbye.